Before we consider international environmental law and climate change, we need to consider domestic legislation, as it is within the sovereign states that international law is put into practice. This reflects the environmentalists' maxim, think globally, act locally. United Kingdom legislative control over the impacts of MONS activity on the environment is not new. As long ago as the reign of Charles II, the main concern was the production of smoke from the burning of sea coal. Almost all areas of trade and industry were subject to very detailed legislative controls at that time, although some were governed by self-regulation in the form of guilds, who regulated both supply and methods of production. However, the measures implemented were mostly ineffective because then, as now, the specifying of legal duties and standards without providing any appropriate enforcement merely indicated good intentions but were of little practical effect. The next stage was prompted by the Industrial Revolution with the urbanization of society and its profound effects on the environment. Local industrialists used the Adam Smith model to maximize their economic benefit, but this was to the detriment of the local environment with the operation of Gresham's law, that is, the bad drives out the good. Those industrialists who were concerned for either the health of their employees or the local environment faced higher costs than their competitors. The result was the need for increasingly comprehensive statutory controls on the discharge of pollutants into various receiving media.
Amory Lovins is an American consultant, experimental physicist, and he has been active at the nexus of energy, resources, economy, environment, development, and security in more than 50 countries for over 40 years. He pays attention on energy saving and how to use energy in a more efficient and sustainable way. He built a house with plenty of energy-saving concepts. He's an unusual character with a wide range of knowledge and a genius, but he is not a scientist. He has a consulting company and lives in a house that is built on a mountain. For 30 years, he used a lot of ways to save energy and solved problems with technologies that already existed and demonstrated them. Some people think he is so crazy. A female writer wrote a book about him, which is called Mr. Green.
class. The men of the North Woods tribes were the hunters. The hunting season began in the fall and continued until midwinter. These expeditions frequently took the hunters away from the village for long periods of time. Moose, deer, beaver, bear, and elk were the animals sought. Large deer drives were common, and small animals were taken with snares or the bow and arrow.
Did the women ever go hunting with the men?
The women often accompanied their husbands on hunting parties. Their job was to take charge of the camps.
Do you mean they just cooked for the men? I thought the Native Americans had more of a system of equality.
Overall, men and women shared the labor. On hunting expeditions, women basically supported the men, whose job was to procure the game. On the other hand, women controlled other realms of life. For example, women managed all of the agricultural operations. Also, a woman headed each clan, and these women were respected for their role as keepers of the clan.
It now seems likely that the earliest printing presses were, in fact, simply the common screw presses used for crushing oil seeds and herbs, or even for doing more domestic chores, such as pressing fabrics, adapted for printing. Other large wooden presses, such as those used for crushing the juice from olives and grapes, known as beam presses, had been around for centuries, but proved to be unsuitable for printing due to their size and their necessarily heavy pressure. Most presses of this type work on the simple principle of direct vertical pressure, controlled by a central screw, at the lower end of which was attached a flat board, what later became known as a platen. We know that many of these earliest printing presses were still in regular use in the 17th century, and the basic design remained almost unchanged until the 19th century, when they were replaced with iron presses.
Hello, may I help you?
Yes, I hope so. My name is Harry Burke. I got a message from someone in this office saying I still needed to pay a lab fee.
Let me check. Harry Burke. Oh yes, the computer shows that you haven't paid the lab fee for your biology class. You'll need to do this before you can attend your lab section.
I didn't know there was a lab fee. I don't remember seeing it on my bill.
Did you register after September 15th?
I think so.
The fee probably didn't show up on your bill because you registered late. I'm afraid you'll have to pay it at the cashier's office.
Okay, I'd better take care of it right away. Thanks for letting me know.
I suppose the reason I got into geology was, well, as a kid I was fascinated by fossils. The fact that they went back countless years, long before there were any people on the planet. That was exciting, and they were beautiful too. And one thing led to another. What fascinates me? Let me give you an example. Suppose we dredge up from the seafloor some silt washed down by a river, and suppose that for political or other reasons we can't enter the country through which that river runs. Well, by careful study of the particles of that silt, we can form a pretty accurate picture of the nature of that country. Not just the rocks, I mean, but the vegetation and animal life of the area. I sometimes think what we do is a bit like Sherlock Holmes. You know, he takes a look at a man's shoes and can tell you which field in which county in England he's been in and when. That sort of detective aspect of the work is always interesting and exciting. OK, we do spend time in the lab and at the computer, but we do get out and about and go to interesting places for field work.
You've all probably heard about zoning laws, but many people are confused about what they are. So I'd like to cover them now. Local governments such as cities and counties typically pass zoning laws. They regulate how people use the land in certain parts of the city or country. Think about our city for a moment. It's divided into various districts. Some are commercial while others are residential. This isn't accidental. It's intentional. The city developed this way because of zoning laws. You see, in the commercial district, there are businesses. And in the residential district, there are houses and apartments. You can't open a factory in the residential district, and you can't erect an apartment building in the commercial district. You can't do these things because of zoning laws. There are actually quite a number of zones. As I just stated, there are residential and commercial zones. There are also industrial, agricultural, and recreational zones. Industrial zones are for factories and other manufacturers. Agricultural zones are for farms, and recreational zones are for parks, lakes, and sporting facilities. So why do we need these zones? Well, think of it like this. Would you like a factory located right next to your house? How about a huge farm next to the shopping mall downtown? Or what about a big warehouse with lots of trucks next to the park? Yeah, that's what I thought. And that's why we have zoning laws. They keep various buildings or businesses out of places where they don't belong.
Earlier this year, I was driving through the countryside with a girl of 6, and she pointed out some flowers by the wayside. I asked her what she thought flowers were for. She gave a very thoughtful answer. 2 things, she said, to make the world pretty and to help the bees make honey for us. I thought that this was a very nice answer, and I was very sorry to have to tell her that this wasn't beep.
Working together, they figured out that if the government was going to propose some kinds of significant tax increases, which is a good strategy, require me to at least lie something like getting something for those big tax brackets, not seeing any results. So the result of that was in the package of legislation that included the tax increases. There was some awesome information to have significant expansion of coverage families where they can buy into their private insurance. Rebuilding carbon-rich agriculture soils is the only real productive, permanent solution to taking excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. She's frustrated that scientists and politicians don't see the same opportunities she sees. This year, Australia will emit just over 600 million tons of carbon. We can sequester 685 million tons of carbon by increasing soil carbon by 0.5% on only 2% of the farms. If we increased it on all of the farms, we could sequester the whole world's emissions of carbon.
When the European Economic Community was established in 1957, its aim was, in broad terms, to move towards closer political and economic cooperation. Today, the much larger European Union has a far-reaching influence on many aspects of our lives, from the conditions we work under to the safety standards we must adhere to and the environment in which we live. In order to achieve the free flow of goods and services, workers and capital between the member countries, they needed to establish mutual policies in areas as diverse as agriculture, transport and working conditions. When they had agreed on these policies, they became law. Now, though, the EU is concerned with a far wider range of issues.
Human beings compete with other things for resources and spaces. Food that contains antibiotics provides few or no nutritional values. Thousands of people turned out to be at the presidential address. Diet and exercise are the foundation of good health.